Have you ever felt like there's a missing piece in your spiritual life? You know, like a powerful tool that was used by some of the most important figures of faith, but now it seems kind of misplaced? Well, today, we're diving into a practice that our source material calls a lost key. So, let's go looking for it together. So right off the bat, our source frames this whole thing around a really powerful idea, a lost key. It's saying that fasting isn't just some obscure, ancient practice. It's a fundamental tool, something that used to be absolutely essential, but has somehow been forgotten by the modern church. Which, of course, begs the question, right? If it's a key, what exactly is it supposed to unlock? Okay, so before we get in too deep, let's make sure we're all on the same page. According to our source, fasting is way more than just skipping lunch. It's a deliberate act. It's renouncing the natural to invoke the supernatural. Think of it like this. You're intentionally turning down the volume on your physical body so that you can turn up the volume on the spiritual world. So, to really wrap our heads around why this matters so much, the source tells us we have to look at the ultimate example. It argues that if you really want to understand the why behind fasting, you have to begin where Jesus himself began his ministry.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Before Jesus performed a single miracle, before he preached a single sermon, his first major recorded act was a 40-day fast. The source presents this not as just some random event, but as the critical, preparatory step that was absolutely essential for everything that came next.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The source points out this subtle but incredibly profound shift in the language. Take a look. Before the fast, it says Jesus was full of the Holy Spirit. Sounds great, right? But look what it says after the fast. He returned in the power of the Spirit. Fullness versus power. According to this interpretation, those are two very, very different things. And boom, that right there just nails the point home. The interpretation here is that fasting was the catalyst. It was the act that took the presence of the Spirit that was already inside him and activated it into real demonstrable power. The source is basically saying this is the pattern. Fasting is what unlocks and releases spiritual power. So you might be thinking, okay, but that was Jesus. He's on another level. Was this just a one-time thing? According to our source, not even close. This wasn't just an example for people to admire. It became standard operating procedure for the early church. Yeah, the first followers of Jesus didn't just treat his fast like some nice story to tell. They saw it as a blueprint, a playbook. They wove fasting right into the fabric of their community, especially when they were facing huge, church-altering decisions. The book of Acts gives us a perfect case study of this in action. I mean, look at this process. Step 1, the leaders are worshiping and fasting together. It's in that environment that step 2 happens, a world-changing idea from the Holy Spirit. But get this, they don't just act on it immediately. Step 3 is crucial. They fast and pray again to confirm it. Only then, in step 4, do they send out their most important missionaries. The source calls this a combination of supernatural revelation and supernatural authorization. And this wasn't a fluke. The source points out a really clear pattern. The early church got together to fast for its two most important activities, sending people out to expand the faith and appointing the next generation of local church leaders. These huge, foundational decisions were just never made without it.
So it's pretty clear Jesus did it and the early church did it. But was this just for the super spiritual leaders? Or was this something intended for everyone? Well, the source argues pretty strongly that it's presented as an expected practice for all believers.
In his most famous teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives direct instructions on how to fast. He's not talking about whether you should do it, he's talking about how you should go about it. Do it privately, don't make a big show of it, because it's for an audience of one.
And here it is, the real kicker. The entire argument really hinges on this one little word. Jesus says, when you fast. He doesn't say, if you fast. According to the source, that's not a suggestion. It's an assumption. The language implies that, of course, this is something his followers are going to do.
And this slide just drives the point home so clearly. In the very same chapter, Jesus uses the exact same phrasing, when you, for 3 core spiritual practices: giving, praying, and fasting. Now, most Christians would agree that giving and praying are non-negotiable, right? So the source asks a pretty simple question. Why would fasting be treated any differently when it's presented in the exact same way? So all of this brings us to the source's main conclusion, that fasting isn't an optional extra. It's not some advanced technique for the super spiritual. It's actually meant to be a foundational part of the Christian life.
I mean, check this out. The Apostle Paul is listing all the things that prove he and his team are authentic servants of God.
And right there, smashed in between enduring things like beatings and imprisonments, he lists self-imposed disciplines like sleepless nights and, you guessed it, fasting.
So Paul isn't bragging here. He's presenting his resume, the credentials of his service, and fasting is right there on the list. The source concludes that this isn't some optional accessory. It's part of the total equipment a servant of the Lord is expected to have. It's essential gear.
So we're left with this really compelling question. The source we've walked through today makes a very strong case that fasting is a lost key to spiritual power, a key used by Jesus to launch his ministry and by the early church to change the world. So the question isn't just historical, it's personal. If this key really has been misplaced, what might it unlock if it were found and used again today?